She had 48 hours to publish the story that could bring down a United States senator, or die before she got the chance. Vivian Mercer had spent 3 years chasing this moment. The photographs on her camera were worth more than her life, and the men hunting her through the rain-slicked streets of Chicago knew it. She ran, she hid, she knocked on the wrong door, or maybe the right one, because the man on the other side of that door didn't just save her life tonight, he was about to change every single thing about it. If you've ever run from something you couldn't name, like this video, drop your city in the comments below. Let me see how far this story travels. The rain had been falling for 6 hours straight by the time Vivian Mercer pressed herself into the shadow of a parking garage pillar and tried to remember how to breathe. Her chest hurt. Not the dramatic, romantic kind of pain that looked good in movies, the real kind, the kind that came from sprinting 4 blocks in wet shoes with a camera bag digging into her shoulder and the absolute certainty that someone was behind her. She'd lost them somewhere between the casino's service entrance and the intersection at Walker and Michigan, but losing them wasn't the same as being safe, and Vivian had been in this business long enough to know the difference. She pressed her back harder against the concrete and listened. Traffic. A cab horn somewhere down the block. The rain hammering the upper levels of the garage like it had a grudge. And underneath all of it, the thing she was listening for. Footsteps. Voices. The particular quality of silence that meant men were moving quietly because they didn't want to be heard. Nothing. She exhaled through her nose and looked down at the camera in her hands. It was a Leica M11. She'd saved for 8 months to buy it, which felt stupid and irrelevant right now, but her brain kept producing that fact anyway, the way it produced useless information when she was terrified. 8 months, $3,000. And inside it, sitting on a 256 gigabyte card, were 14 photographs that were going to end a man's career and probably her life if she wasn't careful about the order of operations. Senator Richard Callaway of Illinois. 43 years in public service. Handshake with the president on the South Lawn twice. A reputation so clean it practically had its own marketing team. And there he was, photograph 7, shaking hands with a man named Esteban Cortez across a table in the private gaming room of the Constellation Casino, while a third man she hadn't been able to identify yet counted bundled cash into a leather bag. Vivian had been working this story for 11 months. She had not expected tonight to happen the way it did. She'd gone to the casino because her source, a former casino compliance officer named Delgado, who was now drinking himself to death in a Waukegan apartment, had told her that the senator sometimes held what he called consultations in the private rooms on the 3rd floor. Nothing she could print without corroboration, but enough to make her drive out there with her camera and a laminated press credential that technically belonged to a food and beverage columnist named James Whitmore, who owed her a favor. The credential had gotten her through the front door. Her ability to look like she belonged somewhere had gotten her the rest of the way. She'd been good at that her whole life, looking like she belonged. She found the room. She'd found a service corridor with a sliver of sightline through a ventilation panel she hadn't expected, and she'd crouched there in the dark with her camera for 40 minutes before the door opened and the right people walked in. The photographs had taken her approximately 3 minutes to capture. The problem was the man who'd seen her leaving. He hadn't said anything. He just looked at her. Wide-shouldered, dark suit, the particular kind of blank professional face that Vivian associated with men who were paid specifically not to react. And then he'd pulled out a phone. And Vivian had made a decision in about half a second. The kind of decision that her editor Marcus would later call reckless, and her therapist, if she had one, would probably call something worse. She ran. She ran through the service corridor and out through a kitchen and past a very startled pastry chef and out a side exit into the rain. She ran for 4 blocks, and then she stopped in the parking garage because her lungs told her she had to. Now she stood in the dark and thought about her options. Her car was parked 2 blocks from the casino, which was 2 blocks from wherever that man with the phone was right now. Her phone had a cracked screen and a battery at 11%. She had a camera worth her life in her hands and photographs worth more than that. She had no backup plan because she'd told herself she wouldn't need one. She allowed herself exactly 3 seconds of acknowledging how badly she'd miscalculated. Then she pushed off the concrete and started moving. The building she was heading for was 30 stories of glass and steel called the Meridian Tower, which she knew because she'd interviewed a tech executive on the 14th floor 8 months ago, and she'd always filed that kind of information away: exits, addresses, the layouts of buildings she'd been in. She didn't know why she was heading there specifically, except that it was tall and lit, and there were doormen and lobbies and people. And right now, people felt like the safest thing she could get to. She was halfway across the intersection when she saw him. Trent. He was standing at the corner of Michigan and Randolph in a gray coat she'd bought him for his birthday 2 years ago. She registered that detail with the particular nausea of recognizing something that used to belong to a different version of her life. He was scanning the street. He hadn't seen her yet. Vivian stopped breathing. Trent Holloway was 38 years old, and he had a private investigator's license and a talent for finding things he wasn't supposed to find, and he had been the most frightening 2 years of her life. She had a restraining order. The restraining order was a piece of paper. Paper didn't stop a man who'd learned to read her patterns better than she'd ever read his, who knew which neighborhoods she worked in and which coffee shops she used, and how she moved through a city when she was scared. He turned his head left. She stepped backward into a doorway. He turned right, scanning the opposite side of the street. She watched him pull out his phone and raise it to his ear, and then she stopped watching and started running again because standing still was going to get her killed twice over tonight. The Meridian Tower's lobby was warm and bright and smelled like recycled air and the particular brand of cologne that wealthy office buildings pump through their ventilation systems. The doorman looked up as she came through the revolving door, and she gave him the smile she'd developed over years of walking into places she technically wasn't supposed to be, confident, slightly distracted, like she was already thinking about whatever meeting she was slightly late for. He looked back down at his desk. She crossed the lobby to the elevator bank and hit the button for the 28th floor because 28 was the highest button she could reach without her keycard, and she needed height right now. Distance from street level, distance from Trent's scanning eyes, and whatever men the casino had dispatched into the rain. The elevator opened. She got in. She rode up in silence with her reflection in the polished steel doors. Wet hair plastered against her cheek, camera bag clutched against her chest, the particular expression she'd always hated seeing on her own face, the one that looked like being caught. She got out on 28. The corridor was dim, most offices dark. A cleaning crew moving somewhere around the corner, the sound of a vacuum, a radio playing something Latin and upbeat that sounded insane given the circumstances. She moved down the hallway away from the cleaners and pulled her phone out. 8% now. She needed to call Marcus. She needed to get these photographs off the camera and onto a secure server before anything else happened to her or the Leica, because if something happened to the photographs, then 11 months of work and a very significant personal risk were worth nothing. She opened her email app and then stopped because the elevator at the end of the hall opened and two men stepped out. Not cleaners, the wide-shouldered man from the casino, and someone else beside him, also dark-suited, also with that particular professional blankness. They were moving quickly, and they had her exit covered, and Vivian stood in the middle of a 28th floor corridor at 11:15 on a Wednesday night and understood that she had run out of moves. Except for the door on her left. There was a thin strip of light visible underneath it. Someone was in there. She hit the handle and pushed through. The office was large and quiet and expensive in the way that money that doesn't need to announce itself is expensive. Clean lines, dark wood, a wall of windows overlooking the city with the rain streaming down the glass in silver threads. The desk in the center of the room was the kind of desk that cost more than her car. The man behind it was looking at her with an expression that communicated precisely nothing. He was maybe 40, dark hair going silver at the temples. A suit that fit the way suits fit when they're made for the person wearing them. He had a glass of something amber on the desk in front of him and a file open that he'd been reading, and he didn't look alarmed by the soaking wet woman who just burst through his door. He looked, if anything, mildly curious. "They're right behind me," Vivian said, because she'd always believed in starting with the relevant information. The man looked at her for a moment, then he set down the glass. "Close the door," he said. His voice was low and even, the kind of voice that didn't rise to meet urgency because it didn't need to. She closed the door. She heard footsteps in the corridor outside. "Sit down," the man said. "I don't—" "Sit down." She sat in the chair across from his desk. He reached across and pressed something on his desk phone, a single button, and then folded his hands and looked at the closed door. 3 seconds. 5. Then knocking. The man stood. He buttoned his jacket, one button, efficiently, and walked to the door and opened it, and Vivian watched from the chair as he looked at the two men in the corridor with the particular expression of a person who is accustomed to people needing things from him and finds it mildly tedious. Mr. Vescari. It was the wide-shouldered man. Up close, he had a jaw like a shovel and eyes that were doing rapid calculations. "We're looking for a woman, journalist. She came up on this floor." "I'm aware of what floor she came up on," the man, Vescari, said. "She's with me." A pause. "With you. Is there a problem with your hearing, or just with my answer?" The wide-shouldered man looked past Vescari at Vivian, and she held herself very still and looked back at him with an expression that she hoped communicated that she was in fact with this person, and had been for some time, and the whole situation was very routine. "Mr. Cortez's people will want to—" "I know what Mr. Cortez's people will want," Vescari said. "And Mr. Cortez can reach out to my office in the morning if he has concerns, through the appropriate channels." A pause. "You're dripping on my floor." The wide-shouldered man looked down at his wet coat. Then he looked back up. "This isn't finished," he said. "Most things aren't," Vescari said, and closed the door. He stood there for a moment with his back to her. Then he turned and walked back to his desk and sat down and picked up his glass. "Thank you," Vivian said. "Don't thank me yet," he said. "You're Vivian Mercer." She went still. "You know who I am. I know who you are. I know what paper you work for. I know you've been investigating the Constellation Casino for approximately 11 months, which is about 9 months longer than you should have been able to without someone noticing." He looked at her camera. "I know what's on that card." The room felt different than it had 30 seconds ago. "How do you know that?" "Because I've been watching the same situation you've been photographing," he said, "for considerably longer than 11 months. Vivian looked at the man across the desk. She looked at the glass in his hand and the file on his desk and the way he sat, which was the way people sat when they were used to being the most dangerous thing in the room. "Who are you?" she said. "Damien Vescari." As if that answered the question. "That's your name." I asked who you are. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile. The suggestion of one. "The people in your photographs," he said, "work for a man named Esteban Cortez. You know that already. What you probably don't know is that Cortez runs the largest private criminal finance operation in the Western Hemisphere. Not drugs, not weapons, primarily. Money. Moving it, cleaning it, investing it, protecting it. He has 43 individuals in elected or appointed government positions across 6 countries who exist on his payroll. Senator Calloway is the least significant of them." He paused. "Your photographs would embarrass Cortez. They would not destroy him. They would, however, absolutely guarantee your death within 72 hours of publication." The rain hit the windows. Vivian's chest was doing something complicated. 4 journalists have been killed in the last 3 years, Vescari continued, who were working in adjacent territories to yours. 2 were ruled accidents. 1 was a suicide. The 4th disappeared. None of them published what they found. He picked up the glass and looked at it rather than at her. "You're better than they were. You got further. That makes you more of a problem, not less." "You're trying to scare me." "I'm trying to give you accurate information," he said. "You can decide what you do with it." Vivian put her hands flat on her thighs to stop them from shaking. "So what do you want?" she said. He looked at her then, and it was the kind of look that took inventory. Not the way Trent looked at her, which was possessive and calculating in the particular way of someone who wanted to control a thing. This was different. This was the look of someone assessing a variable. "I want to offer you a proposition," he said. Before he could continue, Vivian's phone buzzed. She looked down at it. The text was from a number she didn't recognize. "I know you're in the building. Come down or I send them back up." T. She felt the cold move through her like a current. Trent was downstairs. She looked up from the phone and found Vescari watching her with that same level expression, and she understood that he'd seen something in her face. "Someone else?" he said. "My ex-boyfriend," she said, and hated the words even as she said them, because they made her sound like someone with a personal problem rather than a professional one, and she'd spent a lot of years trying not to sound like that. "He has a PI license. He's been tracking me for 4 months." Viscari was quiet for a moment. Then he picked up his desk phone, pressed a different button, and said 2 words. Remove him. He's in the lobby. I heard you, Viscari said into the phone rather than to her. He set it down. He'll be gone in 3 minutes. You can't just... He'll be gone in 3 minutes, he repeated, and his tone didn't change, and Vivian understood that the sentence was not up for discussion. She sat with that for a moment. Outside, the rain pressed against the glass. What's the proposition? She said. He set down the glass and looked at her directly. 3 months, he said. You don't publish. You don't contact federal agencies. You don't share those photographs with your editor or anyone else. And you stay in a location I designate while my people finish what we've been building toward Cortez's operation. In 3 months, I give you everything. Not just the casino photographs, the full architecture of what he's built. Names, accounts, documented transactions, testimony from 3 individuals who will go on record. The story that doesn't just embarrass one senator, but ends the entire network. He paused. That's the proposition. Vivian looked at him. And in exchange, she said, I disappear for 3 months and trust you. A man I met 6 minutes ago. To do what you're saying you'll do. Yes. And if you don't? Then in 3 months you still have your original photographs and you're still alive to publish them, he said, which is better than the alternative. What's the alternative? You leave this building tonight with that camera and you're dead before you can publish anything, he said, simply. Not a threat. An assessment. Vivian thought about the wide-shouldered man in the corridor. She thought about the 4 journalists who'd worked in adjacent territories. She thought about Trent downstairs and Cortez's people in the rain and the 11% battery on her phone and the 11 months of her life sitting on a 256-gigabyte card. She thought about the story. I need to make 1 phone call, she said. To whom? My editor. I need to tell him I'm going dark for a period and that if he doesn't hear from me by a specific date, he should publish everything he has. Viscari considered this. What does he have? Enough to cause problems, she said. Not enough to end Cortez. A pause. 1 call, he said. Brief. No location, no names, no details. She nodded. She called Marcus. He picked up on the second ring, which meant he'd been awake, which meant he'd already known something was wrong tonight. Marcus Hale had been in the business for 30 years, and he'd developed the particular instinct of a man who'd seen enough go sideways that his nervous system stayed on alert even when the rest of him was trying to sleep. Vivian, he said. Not a question. I'm safe, she said. I need you to listen and not ask questions. A beat. Go. I'm going dark. I don't know for how long. If you don't hear from me by the 15th of next month, publish everything in the drive under the Callaway folder. Everything. You don't wait for me to confirm. Silence on the line. Vivian. I know, she said. I know. Don't ask me where I am. I'll contact you when I can. Are you? I'm fine. Publish the folder if you don't hear from me. Say it back. A long pause, then, Callaway folder, 15th. I'll publish. Thank you, she said. I'm sorry for the dramatic phone call. You're never dramatic, he said. That's what worries me. She ended the call. Viscari had watched the whole thing with the same neutral expression. Satisfied? She said. Cautious, he said. It's different from satisfied. He stood and walked to the window and looked out at the city below. The rain, the lights, the long dark grid of streets. You'll need to come with me tonight. There's a car in the building's private garage. We'll collect anything essential from wherever you've been staying in the morning. I have an apartment. You have an apartment that at least one of Cortez's men has probably already noted as a location of interest, he said. You can get your things. You won't be going back. The matter-of-fact quality of it hit her somewhere between her ribs. She looked around the office, the desk with its expensive silence, the rain on the glass, the man standing at the window with his hands in his pockets, looking out at a city that appeared, from his posture, to belong to him. I don't know you, she said. No, he said. You don't. I don't know if any of what you just told me is true. He turned from the window. No, he said again. You don't. And yet you want me to trust you. I want you to make a rational calculation about risk, he said. Trust is a different thing, and I'm not asking for it tonight. Vivian stood up. Her legs were steadier than she expected. I want it in writing, she said. The terms. Whatever arrangement this is, I want it documented. That's not something I'm able to give you. Then I want a witness. Also not possible. Then I want... She stopped. She looked at him. I want to know what you are, not your name. What you are. Because those men in the corridor recognized your name and backed down, and no legitimate businessman makes that happen. And I need to know what I'm agreeing to. He looked at her for a moment. I move money, he said. I facilitate arrangements between parties who need things facilitated. Some of those arrangements exist in legal gray areas. A pause. Some do not. You're in the same business as Cortez. I'm in a parallel business, he said. We have different methods and different standards, and we have been, for approximately 4 years, in fundamental conflict. Cortez wants to absorb what I control. I've been preventing that while simultaneously building the case that ends him. He paused. I'm not a good man, Ms. Mercer. I want to be clear about that. But I have specific reasons for wanting Cortez destroyed that have nothing to do with civic virtue. And those reasons make me reliable in a way that more ethical people sometimes are not. She absorbed this. What reasons? She said. He turned back to the window. That's not part of tonight's conversation, he said. She looked at his back, the set of his shoulders, the careful way he held himself at the glass, like a man who'd learned to stand near windows without silhouetting himself. Okay, she said. He turned. Okay, she said again. 3 months. No publication, no contact with federal agencies, no sharing what I have. In exchange, in 3 months, you give me everything. Correct. And you keep me alive. Yes. And if Cortez gets to me, he won't. She almost said you can't promise that, and then looked at his face and understood that he was, in fact, promising it. There's one more thing, she said. The ex-boyfriend. If he keeps looking for me, he won't, Viscari said, in the same tone he'd used for everything else, which was the tone of a man who stated things that were going to happen, rather than things he hoped might. Vivian stood in the middle of the expensive office with rain against the glass, and the city spread out below, and a camera full of photographs that were worth her life, and she made the worst rational decision she'd ever made. All right, she said, 3 months. He nodded. He went to his desk and pressed the intercom again and said, Tell Vale we're ready. And then he picked up his jacket from the back of his chair, not the suit jacket, a heavier one, and began to put it on with the methodical efficiency of a man who was frequently required to leave places quickly. Adrian Vale arrived in 4 minutes. He was compact and watchful, maybe mid-30s, with the kind of stillness that meant he was always accounting for the room. He looked at Vivian once, briefly, without expression, and then looked at Viscari. Car's ready, Vale said. She needs a bag, Viscari said. What you can grab from her apartment tonight. Vale looked at her. Address. She gave it. He nodded and left. Viscari gestured toward the door. They walked out through the corridor. No sign of the casino's men, no sign of Trent, nothing but the faint sound of the cleaning crew's radio, still playing something upbeat and distant. And into the elevator and down to the parking level. And the whole time Viscari said nothing and she said nothing, and the silence between them wasn't uncomfortable so much as it was carefully neutral, like two people who'd agreed to share a cab to different destinations. The car was black and nothing special looking in the way that certain cars were nothing special looking because drawing attention was worse than blending in. The driver didn't turn around when they got in. They drove through the rain. Vivian held her camera bag in her lap and watched the city blur past the windows. Where are we going? She said. Somewhere safe, he said. That's not an answer. It's the answer I have right now, he said. She looked at his profile in the passing light from street lamps. The clean line of his jaw, the set of his mouth, something in his face that she couldn't read and would have given a lot to be able to read. Your reasons, she said, for wanting Cortez destroyed. You said you'd tell me. I said it wasn't part of tonight's conversation. Tonight's lasted longer than most, she said. A beat. My sister's name was Lily, he said. The way he said it was the way you said a name you'd said so many times inside your own head that saying it out loud had become a different kind of exercise. She was 24. She made the mistake of caring about someone I'd let into my life, a business associate who had connections to Cortez. When the situation between me and that associate deteriorated, Cortez made her a target. What they get you something? A pause. She died 3 years ago. The manner of it isn't something I'll discuss. The city passed outside. I'm sorry, Vivian said. Yes, he said, not dismissively, just yes, acknowledging the word without needing anything from it. She looked back at the window. 11 months, he said after a moment. You worked this for 11 months without anyone stopping you. That's either very good journalism or very good luck. Both, she said. Neither felt like enough tonight. It was enough to get you to me, he said. She didn't know what to say to that. She looked at the camera bag in her lap and thought about Lily Vescari, 24 years old, and the 4 journalists in adjacent territories, and Marcus answering on the second ring because his instincts were still running even in sleep. She thought about Esteban Cortez's name in the file she'd built over 11 months. The money, the senator. The third man at the table whose face she'd gotten in photograph 6, 3/4 profile, clear enough to identify if she could find him in a database. She thought about the proposition she'd accepted in a stranger's office in the rain. 3 months. The car turned off the main road and the city lights began to thin, and Vivian Mercer pressed her back against the seat and understood, with the particular clarity that came to her sometimes when she was very tired and very scared, that she had not escaped tonight. She had traded one cage for another. The only question was what lived inside this one. They drove in silence for another 20 minutes, the rain easing slightly, the streets going from lit to dark to the particular isolated dark of residential areas that backed up to the lake. The driver turned through a gate that opened before they reached it, someone watching, some system she couldn't see, and up a gravel drive toward a house that was large in the way that things designed not to look large sometimes were. Lights were on. A woman appeared in the doorway as the car stopped, 60s, gray-haired, wearing an expression of purposeful calm that Vivian associated with people who had spent their lives managing chaos on behalf of other people. Helena Ross, Vescari said. She runs the household. If you need anything, you ask her. What do I tell her about why I'm here? She already knows, he said. She doesn't need the specifics. Helena came down the steps with an umbrella she didn't fully open because the rain had almost stopped. Ms. Mercer, she said, like Vivian was an expected guest rather than a soaking wet woman who'd been carried here by accident and bad decisions. Let's get you inside. Vivian got out of the car. She looked back at Vescari through the open door. He hadn't moved to get out. You're not... I have other things tonight, he said. Vale will bring your things within a few hours. Helena will show you to a room. He looked at her. Sleep if you can. We'll talk in the morning about what comes next. She stood on the gravel in the fading rain. Mr. Vescari, she said. He looked at her. If you're lying to me, she said, about any of it, the deal, the timeline, what you told me about Cortez, I will find a way to burn everything you've built. I don't care what it costs me. He held her gaze. I know, he said. And the car door closed, and the car backed down the drive, and Vivian stood in the dark outside a house she didn't know, in a situation she hadn't planned, and somewhere inside her chest something that wasn't quite fear and wasn't quite relief was making itself at home. Helena's hand was light on her shoulder. Come on, she said. Warm tea first. Everything else after. Vivian went inside. She didn't sleep for a long time. She lay in a room that was clean and quiet and entirely unfamiliar, with her camera bag beside the bed and the city somewhere distant behind her, and she went through the photographs one more time on the camera's small screen, photograph by photograph. The senator's face, Cortez's face, the third man's 3/4 profile. And she made herself memorize every detail, because if this went wrong, if 3 months from now she was still waiting and Vescari had played her and everything fell apart, she needed every pixel of those images burned into her memory, regardless of what happened to the camera. She reached photograph 9 and stopped. In the background, barely in frame, visible only because of the angle she'd taken the shot at, there was a fourth person in that room, standing near the back wall. She'd missed them in her initial scan because they were partially obscured. She zoomed in. Female. Dark clothing. The shape of a face turned slightly away from the camera. She couldn't make out who it was. She stared at the image for a long time. Then she set the camera down and lay back in the dark and listened to the house settle around her and thought about the 11 months behind her and the 3 months ahead of her and the man in the car who'd said, "I know," when she threatened him, without flinching, like a person who'd been threatened by people whose threats actually meant something and had calibrated hers correctly. And somewhere in that thought, still carrying the weight of the camera bag and the photographs and the long ruined night, Vivian Mercer finally fell asleep. She did not dream. But in the morning, when she woke to the smell of coffee and the gray light off the lake, and the sound of a door somewhere in the house opening and closing with the specific unhurried rhythm of someone who lived here and belonged here, she found the camera already gone from beside the bed. In its place was a small card. 4 words, handwritten. "Your copies are safe." And underneath, a phone number she didn't recognize, and a name she was only beginning to understand. Vescari. She held the card for a long time. Then she got up. The card was still in her hand when Helena knocked. She didn't wait for an answer, just pushed the door open with her shoulder, the way people did when they'd been managing households long enough that knocking was a courtesy rather than a request. And she came in with a tray, coffee, toast, a small glass of orange juice that looked freshly squeezed. She set it on the side table and looked at the card in Vivian's hand without commenting on it. "He took the camera at 4 this morning," Helena said. "He'll return it." "He didn't ask." "No," Helena said. "He doesn't ask for things he's already decided." Vivian set the card down. "That's not how this works," she said. "That camera is my property, and those photographs are copied onto 3 separate encrypted servers," Helena said, pouring coffee like she was reciting a grocery list. "The originals are in a fireproof case in the basement. Your card is untouched. He documented everything before he touched it." She handed Vivian the cup. "He left a list." Vivian took the coffee. Helena produced a folded piece of paper from her apron pocket and set it on the tray and left without another word, pulling the door most of the way closed behind her. Vivian unfolded the paper. It was typed, single-spaced, 8 items, each precise. Camera returned to case, card original unmodified. Images copied to servers A, B, C. Encryption keys held jointly. You have 1 key. I have 1. Third held by Vale. Nothing published, accessed, or transmitted without 2 of 3 keys present. Case location: basement, room 2, combination 1147. Your access: unrestricted. She read it twice. Then she drank her coffee and looked out the window at the lake, which was gray-green in the morning light and choppy from last night's rain. She couldn't see any other houses from here. Trees to the left, water to the right. A strip of weathered dock extending about 40 feet before it ended in nothing. She was in the middle of somewhere. The coffee was very good, which she resented slightly because it was easier to distrust a situation when the coffee was bad. She found her bag from the night before. Vale had brought it while she slept, apparently, because there it was by the door with her laptop and her notebooks and a change of clothes, and she showered and dressed and went downstairs. The house was larger than it had seemed in the dark. Main floor open. Lots of glass facing the lake, kitchen that someone had designed for function rather than display. A sitting room off the hall with books on actual shelves, not decorative ones. She could tell because the spines were cracked and the arrangement was by subject rather than color. A dining table that seated 8 but had been set this morning for 1. Vale was in the kitchen when she walked through. He was standing at the counter with a tablet and a cup of coffee that he didn't appear to be drinking so much as holding while he read, and he looked up when she came in with the expression of a man who'd already decided how much attention this situation was worth and allocated it precisely. "Ms. Mercer," he said. "You can call me Vivian." "Ms. Mercer," he said again, not unkindly, but not moving either. She stopped in the kitchen doorway. "When does he come back?" she said. "When he's done." "With what?" Vale looked at her for a moment. "Things that were already in motion before last night." "I need to talk to him about the terms," she said, "specifically the part where he takes things from my room without asking." "He documented—" "I read the list," she said. "It's a very thorough list. It doesn't change the fact that he walked into my room at 4 in the morning and took my equipment." Vale set the tablet down. He looked at her with the careful attention of a man reassessing an assumption. "I'll let him know you want to discuss it," he said. "I'd appreciate that." She went to the dining table and sat down, and Helena materialized with more coffee and eggs that Vivian ate because she was hungrier than she wanted to admit. And she sat there after with her notebook open and wrote everything she could remember about the previous night in the particular compressed shorthand she'd developed over years of taking notes in situations where she couldn't obviously be taking notes. The third man in photograph 6. She drew his face from memory. Three-quarter profile, the angle of his jaw, a specific quality to his posture. The way he stood with his weight on his back foot, slightly turned, like a man who was always positioning himself near exits. She'd seen that posture before. She sat with the drawing for a long time, trying to locate where. Viscari arrived at noon. She heard the car on the gravel before she heard the door, and then his footsteps in the hall. Unhurried even, the particular rhythm she'd already catalogued from the night before. And then he was in the doorway of the sitting room where she'd moved after breakfast, looking at her with her notebook on her knee and her drawing of the third man visible on the open page. He stopped when he saw the drawing. Something moved through his face that was gone before she could name it. "You're back," she said. "I am." He came in and sat down across from her. Not the chair closest to hers, the one across. And he looked at the notebook and then at her. "You're working." "I'm always working," she said. "We need to talk about the camera." "Helena told me." "Then you know I'm not—" "You're angry," he said. "You should be. I should have left a note before I took it rather than after." He said this with the tone of a man stating an error rather than apologizing for one. "It won't happen again." She looked at him. "That's it?" she said. "What else would you like?" "I'd like to know why you took it at 4 in the morning instead of asking me when I was awake." He was quiet for a moment. "Because at 4 in the morning, I received information that suggested Cortez's people had identified the general area where you'd been staying before last night," he said. "I wanted the photographs copied and secured before dawn. I made a decision about speed over courtesy." He paused. "As I said, it won't happen again." She sat with that. "The third man," she said, turning the notebook so he could see the drawing. "In the casino. Back of the room." He looked at the drawing. His face did the thing again, that brief subterranean movement, like something shifting under still water. "Where did you get that?" he said. "Photograph 9, she said. Background, partially obscured. I almost missed them." He looked at the drawing for another 2 seconds, then looked up. "That's not someone we need to discuss today," he said. "That's not an answer." "No," he agreed. "It's not." "Viscari." "Damien," he said. She stopped. "If we're going to be in the same space for 3 months," he said, "Viscari is inefficient." He said it like it was a practical matter, like efficiency was the actual concern. She looked at him for a moment. "Damien," she said. "Who is he?" A long pause. "Someone I used to know," he said. "Someone who should not have been in that room." He stood up. "I need to make some calls. There's a study on the second floor you can use. Better Wi-Fi, printer, whatever you need for your work. Helena will show you." "I'm not done with this conversation." "I know," he said. "We'll finish it tonight." He left. She looked at the doorway where he'd been standing and then back down at her drawing, and she felt the particular frustration of a journalist being managed. The sense of information being parceled out in deliberate quantities by someone who understood exactly how much to give and how much to hold. She added 3 more details to the drawing from memory. The angle of the shoulder, the cut of the sleeve. Then she went to find the study. The next 3 days established a rhythm that Vivian resented and adapted to simultaneously, the way you adapted to things you couldn't change. She worked in the study in the mornings. Her laptop, her notes, the shape of the story she was building, not the casino photographs, which she couldn't publish yet, but the architecture around them. She wrote profiles of every name she had, traced financial connections, built the scaffolding that would hold the photographs when the time came. She was good at this. She'd always been good at this. The work had a steadying quality that the situation lacked. Damien was in and out. He ate dinner at the house maybe 4 nights out of 7. When he was there, He was quiet in the way of someone whose thinking happened somewhere inaccessible, present in body, partially elsewhere in mind. They talked, sometimes, about the story, about Cortez's operation, about the pieces she'd assembled that he could confirm or redirect without revealing more than he intended to. He was precise about what he gave her, and she was precise about what she asked for, and the negotiation of it was almost professional, except for the way he looked at her drawing of the third man every time he walked through the sitting room. On the fourth day, Vale took her into the city to retrieve more of her things. She'd expected the apartment to feel violated, some sign of entry, some evidence of the men Cortez had sent, but it just looked like her apartment, which was somehow worse because it meant they'd been careful. She went through her desk, her filing cabinet, the box under the bed where she kept the physical backups of her most sensitive notes, which she transferred to a bag without mentioning to Vale that it existed. He noticed anyway. "That coming with us?" he said from the doorway. "Yes," she said. He nodded. In the car on the way back, she asked him, "How long have you worked for him?" Vale watched the road. 8 years. "Since before the sister." A beat. "Yes." "Were you there?" Another beat, longer. "We don't talk about that." "I'm not asking you to give me details," she said. "I'm trying to understand who he is." Vale was quiet for a long time. "He's the kind of man," Vale said finally, "who does what he says he's going to do. In my experience, that's rarer than people think." He paused. "The rest of it, the how and the why of what he is, that's his to tell if he wants to." She looked out the window. "He doesn't want to," she said. "Not yet," Vale said. She turned that over for the rest of the drive. The argument happened on day 9. It started over something small. She wanted to contact Marcus, and Damien said no. And she told him that their agreement included no publication, but did not include severing her professional relationships. And he told her that a phone call to her editor created a traceable contact point that put both of them at risk. And she told him she'd conducted sensitive investigations for 12 years without his input on operational security. And he said something that was technically accurate and delivered with complete neutrality, and somehow still landed like a hand around her throat. "Your last investigation got you trapped on the 28th floor of a building with 2 armed men in the corridor," he said. "Your operational security is what it is." The room went very quiet. She looked at him across the kitchen table where they'd been having what she'd thought was a reasonable conversation. "That was one night," she said. Her voice was even. She was very good at even. "Yes," he said. 12 years of work," she said. 12 years of work, 6 major investigations, 4 published series, one night. "I know," he said. "Then don't use it like that." He looked at her. Something in his face shifted. "You're right," he said. "That was unfair." He said the word like it was a precise technical term. "I'm sorry." She hadn't expected that. She sat back in her chair and the anger lost some of its momentum, and she resented that too. 2 calls per week, she said. Encrypted line, 5 minutes maximum, no location information. Vale can monitor if he needs to. He considered it. 1 call per week, he said. Encrypted. Vale on the line. Vale doesn't need to be on the line. It's not negotiable. She looked at him. "Fine," she said. 1 call. Encrypted. Vale monitors. "Thank you," he said. "Don't thank me," she said. "I'm not doing it for you." He almost smiled. She caught the edge of it and looked away. 2 weeks in, she found the photograph. She wasn't looking for it. She'd gone into the basement to check on the camera, verify the case was where the note had said it was, run through the habit of checking on things she needed to be able to trust. The room was small and clean with a dehumidifier running in the corner, and the case was exactly where he'd said, and the combination worked, and the card was untouched. She was relocking the case when she noticed the shelf on the back wall. It held maybe a dozen framed photographs, personal ones, the kind people kept in the spaces they thought no one would look. She wasn't trying to snoop. She was just there. And the photographs were there. She found the one of Lily without knowing it was Lily. Dark-haired girl, mid-20s, laughing at something outside the frame, arm around a slightly younger version of Damien. Less gray at the temples, some quality of openness in his face that wasn't there now, like a door that had been open once, and then someone had closed it, and changed the locks. He was laughing too. She'd never seen him laugh. She stood there for a moment. Then she put the photograph back exactly as she'd found it and went upstairs. She didn't tell him she'd seen it, but that night at dinner, she asked him, "Do you have anyone left? Family?" He looked up from his plate. "No," he said. She nodded. "You?" he said. "A mother in Portland," she said. "We talk twice a month. I don't tell her what I work on." Wise. "She thinks I cover city council meetings." Something moved in his face, not quite a smile. "Does she believe that?" "She believes what she wants to believe," Vivian said. "Most people do." He looked at her for a moment. "Not you." "No," she said. "Not me." They ate in silence for a while. It was the most comfortable silence she'd had in weeks, which she didn't examine too closely because examining it felt like the beginning of a different kind of problem. The call from Vale came on a Thursday evening, 3 weeks and 2 days into her time at the house. She was in the study, working. Damien was... She didn't know. He'd left that morning and not come back yet, and she'd stopped tracking his movements because tracking them made her feel like she was doing something she didn't want to admit she was doing. Vale's voice on the phone was flat and careful, which she already understood meant something was wrong. "We have a situation," he said. "What kind?" "Trent Holloway has retained a second PI firm," Vale said. "Different from the first. They've been making inquiries at your paper, talking to colleagues, building a picture of your work contacts, your sources, your regular locations." She sat very still. "He's not just looking for me," she said. "No," Vale said. "He's building a map of everything around you, who you talk to, where you'd go, who'd help you." Marcus, she thought. Her stomach tightened. "Has he made contact with my editor?" "Not yet," Vale said. "We're watching." "You're watching Marcus Hale." "We're watching anyone who could lead Trent to you," Vale said. "That's the job." She set down her pen. "If Trent finds something," she started. "He won't." "You don't know that," she said. "He's very good at finding things. He spent 2 years learning how I work, and he—" She stopped. She made herself breathe. "He's not just looking for me because he wants me back," she said. "He's doing this for money. Someone is paying him." A pause on the line. "That's our assessment as well," Vale said. "Cortez?" "Possibly. We're working on it." She stood up from the desk. "Where's Damien?" "In the city. I can reach him." "Reach him," she said. Damien arrived at this house by 9. She was waiting in the sitting room with the lights on and her notebook closed on her knee and the drawing of the third man on top of it. When he came through the door, she could see immediately that the city had cost him something. There was a tightness across his shoulders and his jaw that hadn't been there this morning, and his suit had a different quality to it, like it had been through something. He looked at her and then at the drawing and then back at her. "Vale told you," he said. "Trent is working for Cortez," she said, "or someone connected to him." "Likely." "Which means Cortez already knows I'm a problem," she said. "He already knew before I came here." "Yes." "You knew this when you made the offer," she said. "You knew Trent existed. You said you'd remove him." "I removed him from outside the building that night." "That's not what I understood remove to mean." He sat down. He sat the way he always sat. Straight, economical, nothing wasted. But something in him was tired tonight, and it showed in small ways. "Trent is more complicated than I initially assessed," he said. "He has legal protection as a licensed investigator, and he hasn't technically violated the restraining order. Moving against him directly creates exposure I can't afford right now." "So what does that mean for Marcus?" "We're monitoring the situation." "Monitoring," she said. "Yes." "He could be approaching Marcus right now," she said. "He could be—" "I have 2 people on Marcus Hale," Damien said. "He is not going to be approached without my people knowing first." She looked at him. "You put surveillance on my editor," she said. "I put protection on your editor," he said. "There's a difference." "Is there?" He met her gaze. "Yes," he said flatly. She stood up. She walked to the window and looked out at the dark lake, the dock lights, the nothing beyond. She stood there for a moment. "The third man in my photograph?" she said, to the glass. Behind her, silence. "He's connected to Trent," she said. That's why you looked at the drawing that way. That's why you won't tell me who he is. She turned around. He's the one Cortez sent to Trent. He's the link. Damien was looking at her with an expression she couldn't entirely read. You're fast, he said. I'm a journalist, she said. Who is he? A long pause. His name is Paul Reiner, Damien said. He's Cortez's operations director for the northeastern U.S. He manages the U.S. side relationships, political contacts, enforcement, logistics. He paused. He was also, 4 years ago, the associate I mentioned, the one who led Cortez to Lily. The room was very quiet. He was at that meeting, she said, in the casino, with the senator and Cortez. Yes. And you've known that since you saw my photographs? Yes. And you didn't tell me? No, he said. She looked at him. Because if I knew Reiner was involved, she said slowly, I'd understand that this isn't just about Cortez. This is personal. And a personal motive changes the calculus of whether I trust you. He said nothing. Does it? She said. Change the calculus? He stood up. He walked to the window beside her. Not close, just beside, and looked out at the same dark lake. I want Cortez's organization destroyed, he said. That is entirely true and has been for 4 years. The fact that I also want Reiner specifically is... He stopped. It's a secondary motivation. It doesn't alter the terms I offered you. It alters my understanding of why you offered them, she said. Yes, he said. It does. She looked at his profile. So when you said you'd make Trent disappear, she said, you meant you'd deal with him when it suited the larger operation. Not for my sake. I meant both, he said, but the larger operation takes precedence. He turned and looked at her. I'm not going to lie to you about the order of priorities. It would be pointless to lie to you. She held his gaze. No, she said. It would. They stood at the window, the dark between them and the darker lake beyond. And then Vale appeared in the doorway with his phone in his hand, and the particular expression on his face that meant whatever he was about to say was the kind of thing that changed the shape of a night. Reiner just made contact with Holloway, Vale said. In person, an hour ago. We have it on camera. He looked at Damien. They were looking at a photograph. A beat. Of who? Damien said. Vale's eyes moved to Vivian and then back. Of Marcus Hale leaving his apartment this morning, Vale said, and a woman with him who our people think was on her way to meet him. Vivian's chest went cold. What woman? She said. Vale looked at her steadily. We're working on the identification, he said. But from the build and the hair... He stopped. Say it, she said. It might be your source, Vale said. The compliance officer, Delgado. The cold moved through her in a wave. Delgado. Who knew her methodology? Who knew the name she'd been building toward? Who was drinking himself to death in a Waukegan apartment and who had, in that condition, absolutely no ability to withstand a man like Paul Reiner. The name sat in the room like something with weight. Vivian was already moving before she'd made a conscious decision to move. Across the sitting room, past Vale, into the hallway toward the kitchen where her phone was charging on the counter. She heard Damien behind her, not running, just moving with that particular efficiency that meant he'd already calculated the distance and found running unnecessary. She grabbed the phone. Don't, Damien said. Delgado doesn't have anyone, she said. He's alone. If Reiner gets to him, if you call him, you confirm he's connected to you and you give them a live signal to trace, Damien said. He was standing in the kitchen doorway. Put the phone down. He's my source. He's a liability they've already identified, Damien said, and the flatness of it hit her like cold water. Calling him doesn't protect him. It accelerates the timeline. She stood with the phone in her hand. Her thumb was over the contact. Delgado, R. She'd saved him under a fake name in her regular contacts. Raymond Delgado listed as a plumber named Ray. The kind of mundane misdirection she'd developed over years of protecting people who trusted her. She put the phone face down on the counter. Then what? She said. We just... Vale, Damien said. Already on it, Vale said, from somewhere behind them both. She heard him on his own phone, low and rapid, the clipped cadence of instructions being given to someone who knew how to receive them. Damien looked at Vivian. Sit down, he said. Stop telling me to sit down. Then stand, he said, but stay out of the way for the next 10 minutes while Vale gets people to Waukegan. She stayed standing. She crossed her arms and stood at the kitchen counter and watched Damien take his own phone out and pull up something. A map, she thought, from the angle. And she made herself breathe at a normal rate, because panicking was not going to help Delgado, and it was not going to help her. And it was not going to help anything except make her feel like she was doing something when she wasn't. 8 minutes. Vale came back in. Our people are 12 minutes from Delgado's building, he said. We've got eyes on Reiner. He's still with Holloway. They're at a bar in Wicker Park. He paused. They've been there for 2 hours. They're not going to Waukegan tonight, Damien said. Doesn't look like it. Then we have a window. He looked at Vivian. Delgado needs to move. Tonight. Whatever Vale's people can carry out of that apartment, they carry. Delgado goes to a secondary location, and he stays there until this is resolved. He won't go willingly, Vivian said. He doesn't know your people. He barely trusted me. Then you talk to him, Damien said. On a clean line, 30 seconds, you tell him to open the door and go with the men who knock. That's all. She looked at him. 30 seconds, she said. 20 would be better. She picked up the phone. Damien handed her a different one. Smaller, a burner, the kind with a prepaid card. And she dialed Delgado's number from memory because she'd always memorized the numbers that mattered. It rang 4 times. 5. On the 6th ring, yeah. Rough voice, the particular roughness of someone woken from an early sleep or interrupted mid-drink. Probably both. It's V, she said, using the single letter she'd told him to listen for. Listen to me. Men are coming to your door. Go with them. Don't ask questions. Don't pack anything. Just open the door and go. Do you understand me? Silence. Ray, her voice sharper. Do you understand? How many men? He said. 2. They work for someone I trust. The word trust came out before she'd decided whether she meant it, and she registered that somewhere under the urgency. Go with them. A long pause. You in trouble? He said. We both are, she said. Go. She ended the call and handed the burner back to Damien and stood there with her regular phone still face down on the counter and the kitchen fluorescents too bright overhead and the sound of Vale back on his own phone relaying something in that low, rapid voice. Damien was watching her. You said you trust me, he said. I said someone I trust, she said. I was talking about the situation, not a character reference. He almost smiled. Again, that edge of it. She looked away. The next 4 hours were the specific misery of waiting without enough to do. Vale's people got to Delgado's building and confirmed contact at 11:47. Delgado was moved to what Vale described as a clean location, which Vivian understood to mean a place Cortez's network didn't know about. Reiner and Trent were tracked to 11 p.m. at the Wicker Park bar, and then lost briefly, which produced a bad 15 minutes, and then reacquired outside a parking garage on Division Street, apparently parting ways. Vivian sat in the study with her notebook and didn't write anything. She thought about the photograph of Damien and Lily on the basement shelf, the open quality in his face that didn't exist anymore, the door that had been closed. She thought about Paul Reiner in a casino room with Senator Calloway and Esteban Cortez, and what it meant that he'd also been the man who delivered Lily Viscari to her death, and what it meant that Damien had known since the first night who was in that photograph and had said nothing. She thought about Trent with a picture of Marcus leaving his apartment. At 1 a.m, she went downstairs. The light in Damien's study, a different study, his, on the opposite side of the house, was still on under the door. She knocked. Come in, he said. He was at his desk, jacket off, sleeves rolled to the forearm, the kind of end-of-day dishevelment that looked, on him, like a deliberate reduction rather than actual loosening. He had papers in front of him and a glass beside them, and he looked up when she came in with the neutral attention he gave most things. Delgado is settled, she said. Yes. And Reiner, we're tracking him. She sat down in the chair across from the desk. Same configuration as the first night, she noticed. His desk between them. The same geometry of negotiation. How close are you, she said, to finishing what you're building against Cortez? He considered the question.
Let's say
6 weeks, he said. Maybe 8. We have 3 of the 43 individuals documented and prepared to cooperate. We have financial records covering approximately 60% of the operation. We need the remaining 40%, and we need Reiner's specific documentation because he's the operational link. Without him, the case against Cortez's U.S. network is circumstantial. 6 to 8 weeks, she said. That's inside the 3 months. Yes. And Reiner, his documentation, how do you get that? He looked at her steadily. There's an associate of Reiner's, he said. Someone who's been feeding us information for 14 months. They have access to records that would complete the financial picture. He paused. We've been waiting for the right moment to extract those records without tipping Reiner that his associate has been compromised. She felt the shape of something she didn't yet have words for. Who's the associate? She said. A pause. That's not... Who is it? She said. He looked at her. Someone inside Cortez's network, he said. That's as specific as I'm going to be. She looked at him for a long time. Okay, she said, and stood up. Good night. He watched her go. She stopped in the doorway. For what it's worth, she said, to the door frame rather than to him, what you said about Reiner and your sister. I understand why you didn't tell me the first night. I don't think I would have either. She paused. That's not forgiveness. It's just a statement of fact. She went to bed. She didn't sleep well. She lay in the dark, and the feeling she couldn't name yet moved around the edges of her thinking, and at 4 a.m, she sat up and reached for her notebook and wrote one line. Who inside Cortez's network has been feeding him information for 14 months? She stared at it. Then she wrote underneath it. And what does Reiner do when he finds out? The answer to the second question was obvious. The answer to the first one was what kept her awake until dawn. She found out 9 days later. Not because Damien told her, because of a file. Vale had given her access to a shared drive. Restricted, specific folders only. The documentation she needed to build the published stories framework without accessing anything operationally sensitive. She'd been working from it for 2 weeks. She knew its structure. On the morning of day 31, she opened the drive and found a folder that hadn't been there the day before. It was labeled with the date, 4 years ago, November, and nothing else. She should have closed it. She knew she should have closed it. She was a journalist who had spent 12 years knowing exactly which lines existed and why, and opening a mislabeled folder on someone else's restricted drive without permission was the kind of thing that created problems she didn't need. She opened it. Inside were 2 documents and 1 photograph. The photograph loaded first. She sat very still. It was Lily Viscari, not the laughing version from the basement shelf. This one was formal, taken outdoors. The particular quality of a surveillance photograph shot from distance and blown up. Lily was walking beside a man whose face was turned away from the camera. The second photograph was the same man, different angle, face visible. She didn't know him. She opened the first document. It was a transcript, dated 4 years ago, November. Names abbreviated. L. They said if I came forward it would stop. R. It won't stop, you know that. L. Then what do I do? R. You do what he says. You give them what they want, and you don't tell your brother. Her chest was tight. L. He'll find out. R. Not if we're careful. L. He finds out everything. R. Not this time. She opened the second document. It was a report. Internal, clinical, the language of people documenting things they needed to be able to reference later. It was about Lily Vescari's final 72 hours. The movements, the contacts, the chain of decisions that had led from a conversation to a consequence. And at the bottom, a name. Not Reiner's name. A different name. The name of the person who had given Cortez's people Lily's location. The person who had made a transaction. Information in exchange for their own protection. The associate. Damien's associate. The one feeding him information for 14 months. It was the same person. Vivian read the name 3 times. Then she closed the drive and sat for a very long time at the desk in the study, with her hands flat on the surface and the morning light coming through the window at a low angle that made everything look provisional and thin. The associate who had been feeding Damien information for 14 months, information he was using to build his case against Cortez, information he believed was loyal and reliable and solid enough to rest the whole operation on, was the same person who had sold Lily's location to Cortez 4 years ago. She didn't know if Damien knew. She didn't know which was worse, that he knew and had chosen to use the source anyway because the information was valuable enough, or that he didn't know and was building his entire case on a foundation that was already rotted through. She stood up. She walked downstairs. Damien was in the kitchen, standing at the counter with coffee and his phone, reading something with the particular quality of early morning concentration. He looked up when she came in. He saw her face. He set the phone down. "What happened?" he said. She put the name on the table between them. She'd written it on a piece of paper, the way you sometimes needed to write something down to make it real enough to say out loud. He looked at it. She watched his face, and she saw it. The thing she'd been trying to read for 31 days. The thing behind the neutral expression and the measured sentences and the careful parceling of information. She saw it come apart, not dramatically, not the way it happened in movies, just a fracture. Something structural giving way under a weight that had been building for 4 years and had just, in this moment, exceeded what the structure could hold. He picked up the paper. He read the name. He set it back down. "Where did you get this?" he said. His voice was level. Everything about his voice was always level, but underneath the level was something she'd never heard before. Something that sounded like the specific silence of a man deciding whether to keep standing. "A folder in the shared drive," she said. "It appeared this morning. I don't know if it was mislabeled or if someone put it there deliberately." He was quiet. "Damien," she said, "I heard you." "Did you know?" A long pause. The kind of pause that could go either way. "No," he said. She looked at him. "Do you believe me?" he said. She looked at the paper on the table, the name on it. The person who had spent 14 months feeding Damien exactly enough truth to make him trust them while Cortez watched the whole thing and waited. "Yes," she said. "I believe you." He was quiet again. She watched him pick up his coffee cup and set it down without drinking from it, and she understood that the gesture was not about coffee at all. "He knew, Damien said. "Cortez, he's known for 14 months that we were building the case. He let it build." He paused. "Because he controls what we know. He controls what we think we have." His voice was still level, but it had taken on the particular quality of someone speaking through something they were simultaneously processing and trying not to process. "Everything I thought I had on him, the financial records, the witness testimony, it's all been managed. He knows what we have because he's been deciding what to give us." Vivian sat down. The implications moved through her like cold water finding the lowest point. "The 3 cooperating individuals," she said. "Compromised," he said, "or fed to us. The financial records, incomplete in the specific ways that protect the most important transactions." He picked up the paper again and looked at the name. 60% of the picture. He's been letting us build a case that has exactly enough to create a legal problem he can manage. He set the paper down. "Not enough to end him." She looked at him. 14 months, she said. "Yes." "And the associate has been inside your operation the entire time." "Yes." She sat with that. "Then Cortez knows I'm here," she said. "He's known since I arrived." Something moved in Damien's jaw. "Almost certainly," he said. The kitchen was very quiet. "He hasn't moved on me," she said. "He knows where I am, and he hasn't... Why hasn't he..." "Because you're more useful as bait than as a problem he's already solved," Damien said. And the flatness of it was the flatness of a man saying the thing that cost him something to say. "He's waiting for the moment I move. When I think I have enough to act, when I deploy whatever I've built, that's when he closes the whole thing. Me, you, the case, sis, everything." She sat very still. Outside, the lake was gray-green and the morning was indifferent, and somewhere in the city a man named Esteban Cortez was watching this house through an associate's eyes and waiting for the right moment to end everything in it. "The photographs," she said. "Still valid," he said. "He can't control what you captured. Reiner and Calloway and Cortez in that room. That's real. That's not something he fed anyone." He paused. "But without the financial architecture, without the cooperative witnesses, without the documentary evidence, it's damaging but not fatal." "It's enough to publish," she said. "It's enough to create a legal crisis for Calloway," he said. "It implicates Cortez. It doesn't end him. It ends the senator." "Yes." She looked at the paper on the table. "Then that's what we have," she said. He looked at her. "The original deal was everything," he said. "Not just The original deal was based on a case you no longer have, she said. The architecture is compromised. Your witnesses are compromised. You've lost 14 months of work. She paused. What you have left is my photographs. And my photographs are enough to blow this open publicly, which changes the game entirely. Cortez can't close a story that's already been published nationwide. He was quiet. She watched him think. The real kind of thinking. Not the processed, presented version she usually got from him, but the actual machinery of it, visible for once. He'll move before you can publish, he said. If he figures out the case has collapsed, he'll move immediately. Then he can't figure it out, she said. He can't know you found out about the associate. He'll know. If I move against the associate, he'll know. Then you don't move against the associate yet, she said. You let them think nothing has changed. You keep feeding the associate false information about where the case stands, and She stopped. She felt the thing she'd been circling land finally. I need to get out of here, she said. I need to get to Marcus. I need to be in a position to publish the moment we decide to move, and I can't do that from a house Cortez's people have been watching for a month. Damien looked at her. If you leave this location, I know, she said. I know what it means. Cortez will interpret it as the case breaking down, he said. He'll accelerate. Which is why we have to be ready to move the same day I leave, she said. Same day. I go to Marcus with the photographs, I file the story, it publishes. Same window. I can't be ready to move in. How long? She said. Forget the compromised case. Forget the 14 months. What do you have that's clean? What's real? He looked at her steadily. I have Reiner, he said quietly. What I know about Reiner, what he did to Lily. There's documentation, separate from anything the associate touched. Things I kept outside the operational structure because they were personal, not admissible in the same way, but enough, she said. Enough to give to federal investigators alongside the photographs. He said nothing. She looked at the name on the paper between them. You've spent 4 years building a case, she said, and someone you trusted spent 14 months hollowing it out from the inside. She paused. That's what I have too. Trent spent 2 years learning how I worked, and he used it to find every vulnerability. We've both been operating on information that was managed against us. He picked up the paper again. He folded it once, precisely. I need 48 hours, he said. To do what? To salvage what's clean and build something functional out of it. He looked at her. Can you give me 48 hours? She thought about Marcus, about Delgado in some location she didn't know, about Trent with a photograph of people she was responsible for. She thought about the folder in the drive that had appeared this morning and still didn't know if it was an accident or something deliberate. Someone inside Damien's operation trying to surface the truth, or Cortez playing one more layer of the game. 48 hours, she said. And then we move. He nodded. He stood up and picked up his phone and walked toward the door and then stopped. The folder, he said. The one in the drive. Yes. It wasn't mislabeled, he said. He didn't turn around. I put it there. She sat very still. Last night, he said, after you went to bed. I found out about the associate 3 days ago, and I've been trying to decide how to tell you. He paused. I decided you needed to see it rather than hear it, because I knew if I told you, you'd want to know how I could be sure of my own account. But if you found it yourself, then I could verify it independently, she said, before you said anything. Yes. She absorbed this. You've known for 3 days, she said. Yes. And you didn't? I was wrong not to tell you immediately, he said, to the doorframe. I'm telling you now. She looked at his back. Damien, she said. He turned. If we get 48 hours, she said, it's because Cortez doesn't know you found out, which means the associate has to keep believing you trust them. She paused. Can you do that? Can you be in the same room with the person who killed your sister and look like you don't know? The question sat in the air. He looked at her with the expression she still couldn't fully read, that layered, guarded thing. And for a moment she saw under it. Not the fracture from earlier, something older, something that had been there long before this morning. He looked at her with the expression she still couldn't fully read. And then he said, I've been doing it for 3 days already, and walked out. She sat at the kitchen table for a long time after that. The 48 hours began at 7 in the morning. By 8, Damien was on the phone with someone she didn't have a name for, speaking in the clipped shorthand of people who'd worked together long enough that full sentences were inefficient. Vale was moving through the house with the particular focused energy of a man running simultaneous tracks in his head. Helena had stopped pretending the breakfast routine was normal and was instead making coffee in large quantities and staying out of rooms where conversations were happening. Vivian went to the study and opened her laptop and began building the publication package. Not the full story, not yet, not without the financial documentation Damien was trying to salvage, but the photographs, the caption architecture, the sourcing notes, the legal framework that Marcus would need to move the piece through the paper's attorneys in under 12 hours. She'd published under pressure before. She knew how fast the machinery could move when it had to. She worked for 3 hours without stopping. At 11, Damien knocked on the open door. She looked up. He looked like someone who had spent the night running calculations and found most of them came up short. There were lines around his mouth that hadn't been as visible yesterday, and his eyes had the particular flat quality of sustained adrenaline. "Sit down," she said, because she'd never said it to him before, and it felt like something worth doing. He almost smiled. He came in and sat in the chair across from the desk. "What do you have?" she said. "Clean documentation on 7 financial transactions," he said, "separate from anything the associate touched. They're small relative to the full picture, but they're complete. Traceable, sourced, corroborated by records from 2 financial institutions that Cortez doesn't control." He paused. "I also have a recorded conversation. 14 months old, taken before the associate was embedded, between Reiner and a federal official in the Northeastern network. It's specific enough to support 3 federal counts. Is it legally obtained? A beat. Define legally, he said. Damien. It was obtained through a method that a good attorney could argue within acceptable parameters, he said. It's not clean, but it's real, and a federal prosecutor who wants to use it will find a way. She looked at him. And Reiner's documentation, she said. What you kept separate, the personal file. His jaw moved slightly. Enough, he said. Enough to put Reiner in a room with federal investigators and make them very interested in his cooperation. He paused. Which means his testimony, if he decides to cooperate in exchange for a deal, fills the gaps in everything else. He'd give up Cortez to save himself. Reiner is a practical man, Damien said. He made a transaction 4 years ago to save himself. He'll make another one. Something in the way he said it, the absolute cold of it, made her look at him directly. Can you accept that? She said. Reiner getting a deal, reduced sentence, protection. He held her gaze. I can accept Cortez destroyed, he said. The order of what happens to Reiner after that is a separate question. She held his gaze. I'm going to need you to be more specific, she said. I'm not going to kill him, he said flatly. If that's what you're asking, it's part of what I'm asking. The rest of what you're asking, he said, is whether I can watch him walk into a courthouse and testify and walk out with reduced charges and a new identity somewhere. And the honest answer is that I don't know. But I know that right now, today, it's the only path that ends Cortez's network completely and doesn't end both of us in the process. He paused. So I'll do it. She looked at him for a moment. Then she looked back at her screen. I need to call Marcus, she said. Not the 1 call per week arrangement, a real call, full brief, everything he needs to prep the legal team. Yes, Damien said. Use the landline in my study. It's cleaner. She looked up. You're not going to negotiate the terms, she said. No, he said. We're past negotiating terms. She nodded. She called Marcus at 11:40. He picked up on the first ring. She talked for 22 minutes. She told him everything that mattered. The photographs, the framework she'd built, the financial documentation Damien was transferring to a secure server, the recorded conversation, Reiner's role, and his likely path to cooperation. She told him about the associate and the compromised case and the fact that Cortez knew more than he should about all of it. She told him they needed to be ready to publish within a 48-hour window and that when the window opened, it would open fast. Marcus was quiet for a long time after she finished. Vivian, he said. I know, she said. I know, she said. Can you do it? Another pause. The legal team will need 6 hours minimum, he said, from the moment I give them the full package. You'll have it by tonight, she said. And He stopped. You're safe. Yes, she said. The man you're with is complicated, she said, and keeping me alive, in that order. A beat. All right, Marcus said. I'll have everyone ready. Don't tell anyone what's coming, she said, not until you have the package in hand. I know how to do this. I know you do, she said. That's why I called you first and ran second. He made a sound that was almost a laugh. She ended the call. She sat for a moment in Damien's study with the landline in her hand and the afternoon light falling across his desk, the file, the glass, the particular geometry of a workspace that belonged to someone who thought in straight lines even when everything around him wasn't. Then her phone buzzed. Vale, text only. Need you downstairs now. The tone of it, even in 4 words, was wrong. She went downstairs fast. Vale was in the kitchen. Damien was already there, standing, jacket on, and the quality of the room was the quality of rooms where something has just changed the weight of the air. What? She said. Reiner moved, Vale said. 40 minutes ago. He's not where we had him tracked. He made the associate, Damien said. He wasn't looking at Vale. He was looking at the table. Somehow he figured out we know. The associate tipped him. We don't know that for... Vale started. He moved 40 minutes after I pulled the clean files, Damien said. He knows. The kitchen was very quiet. Where's he going? Vivian said. Vale's phone buzzed. He looked at it. His face did something. Vale, Damien said. He's not going anywhere, Vale said. He's already there. He looked up. He's at Marcus Hale's building. The floor tilted slightly under her. She grabbed the counter. How? She said. The word came out thin. How does he... The associate, Damien said. He was already moving toward the door. The phone call this morning, the landline, was clean, Vale said. I checked. It was clean from outside, Damien said. If someone inside the house... He stopped. They all 3 stopped. The word inside sat in the room. Vivian looked at Vale. Vale looked at Damien. And Damien turned very slowly and looked at the kitchen doorway. The hallway beyond it. The house around them. The house that had been for 31 days the assumed safe perimeter. Who else is in the building? Damien said. His voice had gone very quiet. Myself, you, Miss Mercer, Helena. Where's Helena? Damien said. Vale pulled out his phone. They went through the house fast. Not running. Moving with the controlled speed of people who understood that running announced things. The sitting room empty. The dining room empty. The basement door standing open, which it shouldn't have been. Damien went down the stairs first. The room with the camera case was undisturbed. The dehumidifier running. The shelf of photographs still arranged as it had been. But Helena's phone was on the floor beside the washing machine, screen cracked, face up, and the back door that opened onto the narrow utility corridor behind the house was ajar by about 3 inches with the cold air coming through. Vivian felt the cold move through her that had nothing to do with the door. She was the associate, she said. The sentence sat there, not a question. Damien stood looking at the open door with his hands at his sides and his face doing the thing it had done this morning in the kitchen. That structural fracture moving under the surface. She's been here since before Lily, he said. Quiet. She was already... He stopped. Vale was on his phone. I need 2 cars and 4 bodies at this address in under 10 minutes, Vale said into it, moving back toward the stairs. And someone at Marcus Hale's location at 116 East 67th. Now, move. Damien turned from the open door. Whatever the fracture had been, it was gone now. What replaced it was something she'd seen the edge of, but never the full thing. The complete operating version of whoever Damien Vescari was when he stopped being careful about what he showed. Get your laptop and the camera, he said to Vivian. Everything you need to publish. 2 minutes. Marcus, Vale's people are already moving, he said. 2 minutes. She went. She took the stairs faster than she'd ever taken anything in this house, and she was in the study in 30 seconds, pulling the laptop into the bag, the notebooks, the charger, And then she was in her room grabbing the camera case and the burner phone Vale had given her and the notebook from beside the bed. And she did it in 1 minute and 40 seconds because her body had moved into the specific operational mode that fear sometimes produced. Not the paralyzed kind of fear, the clarifying kind. Damien was in the hallway when she came out. He looked at the bag. Good, he said. They went out through the front. 2 cars had arrived, black, different from the one she'd ridden in that first night, the kind of different that meant they'd been kept separate from the house's regular rotation. She got in the second car with Vale. Damien got in the first. We're going to the city, Vale said. Separate routes. Marcus, our people are at his building, Vale said. He's being moved to a secondary location. He's fine. Is he fine or do you think he's fine? Vale looked at her. Our people confirmed visual on him 4 minutes ago, he said. He is fine, she breathed. The city came toward them as the car moved through the morning, the lake disappearing behind them, the skyline assembling itself out of distance. Vivian held the camera bag on her lap and thought about Helena Ross making coffee and saying warm tea first, everything else after on the first night, and the particular quality of purposeful calm she'd attributed to someone who managed chaos on behalf of other people, and how that quality looked exactly the same whether the person was genuinely there to help or specifically positioned to watch. 31 days. She thought about every conversation, every phone call, everything said in the kitchen, in the study, in the hallway, what Helena would have heard, what she'd have been able to access, to relay, to shape. The camera case in her lap felt very heavy. They reached the city at 2 in the afternoon. The secondary location Vale had designated was a floor of a building in the financial district that had the particular anonymous quality of corporate temporary space. Bland furniture, fast Wi-Fi, the kind of room that was used for things that needed a room and couldn't have a permanent address. Marcus was already there when they arrived, standing by the window with his coat still on, and the expression of a man who had been moved quickly and was processing the speed of it. He looked at Vivian when she came through the door. She looked at him. Hi, she said. Hi, he said. What the hell? I know, she said. Are you okay? 2 men I've never met appeared in my lobby and told me to come with them, he said. So I'm functional. What is happening? Our inside contact gave our location to Reiner, she said. Reiner was coming for you. Marcus absorbed this with the stillness of someone who'd been in enough bad situations to understand that reacting to them took time he didn't currently have. Reiner, he said. Cortez's operations director, she said. He runs the U.S. network. He's the link between Cortez and Calloway and everything else. She set the bag on the table. He was coming for you to get to me. We're moving the timeline. To when? Tonight, she said. Marcus looked at her. You said the legal team needed 6 hours from the full package, she said. I said minimum 6 hours. Can they do it in 4? He looked at the ceiling briefly, the particular expression of someone doing mental arithmetic about other people's capacity. If I call them right now, he said, and if the package is complete and clean. Call them, she said. He was already on his phone. Damien arrived 20 minutes later. He came through the door with Vale and someone she hadn't seen before. A compact woman in her 50s, with the bearing of someone who testified in federal courtrooms as a professional matter, which turned out to be accurate. Her name was Sloan. She was a federal prosecutor who operated in the specific gray area between official capacity and off-the-record cooperation. And Damien introduced her with the efficiency of someone who'd long ago stopped explaining the full context of his professional relationships. Vivian looked at Damien. He looked at her. Something passed between them in that look that was several things at once. Acknowledgement, assessment, the particular recognition of 2 people who had been through enough together in a short enough time that the shorthand was already developed. Marcus Hale, Damien said, turning to Marcus. Damien Viscari, Marcus said. The names exchanged like opening positions. I know what you are, Marcus said. I know what you are, Damien said. Tonight we need both of them. Marcus looked at Vivian. She nodded. They worked. For 3 hours they worked at the table in the bland corporate room with laptops and phones, and the documentation coming through on the encrypted server, and Sloan asking precise questions about the financial transactions, and Marcus's legal team on a conference line asking different precise questions, and Vale managing a separate track of communication that Vivian could hear in pieces through the wall where he'd stepped out. The photographs were submitted to the legal team at 4:17. The financial documentation followed at 5. The recorded conversation, Damien handing it to Sloane directly. A small drive, no annotation, the two of them looking at each other for a moment before she took it, went to the federal contact at 5:40. At 6:10, Vale came back into the room. He went to Damien and said something close, quiet. Vivian watched Damien's face. "What?" she said. Damien looked at her. "Reiner knows we're in the city," he said. The room went cold. "How?" Marcus said. "Doesn't matter how," Damien said. "He's already moving." He looked at Vale. "How long?" "Unknown," Vale said. "Our tail lost him in Midtown 40 minutes ago." "He's been in Midtown for 40 minutes, and you're telling me now," Damien said. "I'm telling you when I confirmed it," Vale said, and there was an edge under that. Not insubordination, just the friction of two people who'd worked together long enough to push back. Damien turned to Sloane. "The recorded conversation," he said. "Is it enough to bring Reiner in?" She looked at him steadily. "If your federal contact moves tonight," she said, "and if the conversation is as specific as you say." "It's specific." "Then yes," she said, "but Reiner will run the moment he knows there's a warrant in process. If he gets out of the country, he won't," Damien said. He looked at Vale. "Make the call. The federal contact. Right now." Vale was already dialing. Vivian watched Damien cross the room to the window and look out at the city below, the early evening light going gold across the buildings, the particular quality of a city that didn't care what was happening in one room, in one building, on one floor. She went to stand beside him. Not close, just beside. "Helena," she said quietly. "You trusted her?" "Yes," he said. "For how long?" 11 years, he said. "She came to work for me a year after I built the first real piece of the operation. Before Lily. Before—" He stopped. "She's been there for all of it." Vivian said nothing. "I don't know when Cortez turned her," he said. "Maybe from the beginning, maybe somewhere in the middle. It doesn't—" He stopped again. "It doesn't actually change what she did." "No," Vivian said. "It doesn't." They stood at the window. "When this publishes," she said, "and when the federal piece moves, what happens to you?" He looked at the city. "I have attorneys," he said, "and I have documentation of my own that establishes certain things about the last 4 years in a way that makes a specific kind of prosecution complicated." A pause. "I'm not untouchable, but I'm not unprotected." "That's not what I asked," she said. He turned and looked at her. She held his gaze. "I don't know," he said. And it was the most unguarded thing he'd said to her in 31 days, because all the other times he'd said, "I don't know," he'd meant it as a calculation rather than an admission, and this time it was the other kind. Vale appeared in the doorway. "Federal contact is moving," he said. "Warrant process is initiating. They want Reiner picked up tonight." He paused. "There's a problem." "What kind?" Damien said. "Reiner knows," Vale said. "We think he knows the warrant is coming. He's made contact with someone at the building." "Which building?" Vivian said. Vale looked at her. "This one," he said. The silence lasted exactly 1 second. Then every phone in the room went off simultaneously. Vale's, Damien's, the landline on the table. And the sound of it was the sound of something changing, a gear catching, a machine engaging that couldn't be stopped once it started. Damien crossed the room in 4 strides and picked up the landline. He listened for 6 seconds. He set it down. He looked at Vale, and what passed between them in that look was the specific communication of 2 men who had planned for bad versions of things, and were now in a worse one. "He's in the building," Damien said. Vivian's chest locked. "Marcus," she said. She turned to where Marcus had been standing, and he was already moving, reaching for his bag. The instinct of a man who'd been in enough situations to know when the room was about to become the wrong place to be. "The stairwell on the north side," Vale said, pulling his jacket open to check something at his belt. 17 floors down, exit onto 48th. There's a car waiting." "Go," Damien said to Vivian. "What about—" "Go," he said. She looked at him. He looked at her, And in his face was the thing she'd seen forming for 31 days, the thing that had been building under all the careful neutrality and the measured sentences and the precise parceling of information, something that was past professional and past the specific mathematics of a deal, and past even what had happened between them over 3 weeks of proximity and shared danger, something that was just there, visible, whether he'd intended it to be or not. "Come with us," she said. "I can't," he said. "I need to know where Reiner is in this building, and I need to be between him and you until the federal team arrives." He paused. "Vale will get you out." Damien. Vivian. Her name in his mouth, the first time he'd used it, and the weight of it was different from Miss Mercer, in the way that the difference between those two things meant something she didn't have time to examine. "Go." She went. The stairwell was cold and concrete, and their footsteps echoed in a way that felt dangerous, the sound bouncing off the walls and coming back wrong. Vale was in front, Marcus behind her, 17 flights of stairs going down in the particular unreality of emergency movement, the body on automatic while the mind kept pulling back toward the floor they'd left. Damien alone in that room. Reiner somewhere in the building, the warrant in process but not yet executed. The window between those two things was the size of a mistake. She hit the 14th floor landing and stopped. "Keep moving," Vale said, not turning around. "The photographs," she said. "Marcus, do you have everything?" "Everything is on 3 devices and a cloud server," Marcus said. "Keep moving." She kept moving. 9th floor. The sound of a door somewhere above them. She couldn't tell how far. The acoustics were wrong. And Vale's hand came up in a gesture that meant stop, and they stopped on the landing, breathing, the sound of the door fading or maybe not fading. 10 seconds. Vale's hand dropped. They kept moving. Ground floor. The door to the exit, a push bar. The cold air of 48th Street hitting her like something solid. A black car at the curb, engine running, a driver who didn't turn around. Vale had her arm. Not rough, just directional. And then she was in the car and Marcus was beside her and the door closed and the car started moving. She looked out the back window. The building's entrance behind them. The lobby lights. No sign of anything wrong from the outside. Just a building, just a street, just the city going about its business in the early dark. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered it. Static. Then, "Ms. Mercer?" A voice she didn't recognize, male, measured, with the particular quality of someone who is accustomed to being the calmest person in whatever situation they were in. "My name is Reiner." The car kept moving. She said nothing. "I want you to tell your driver to stop the car," Reiner said. "And I want you to tell Mr. Hale to give me the drive with the financial documentation. And then I want you to listen very carefully to what I'm going to offer you in exchange for those 2 things." Marcus was looking at her. Vale in the passenger seat was already on his own phone. She looked out the window. "Where's Damien?" she said. A pause. "Mr. Vescari is currently indisposed," Reiner said. The cold moved through her. "What does that mean?" she said. "It means," Reiner said, "that you should stop the car." And in the background, behind his voice, she heard something that stopped her breath entirely. A sound she couldn't misidentify because it was the kind of sound that was specific and unmistakable, and once you'd heard it, you never heard anything else the same way again. It was Damien's voice. One word, spoken through what sounded like effort. One word. Through the phone, through the static, through the distance between wherever Reiner was holding him and the back seat of a moving car on 48th Street. One word in Damien's voice, spoken the way you spoke when speaking, cost something physical. Don't. She knew immediately what it meant. Not "don't stop the car," not a tactical instruction. It was the other kind. The kind that came from someone who understood exactly what was being offered and exactly what accepting it would cost, and had made a calculation in the half-second available to him. "Don't trade yourself for me." The car kept moving. Reiner's voice came back on the line, smooth and patient, the voice of a man who believed he had time. "Miss Mercer," he said. "I heard him," she said. "Then you understand the situation." "I understand," she said, "that you're in a building that has federal personnel arriving within the next 20 minutes, and you've chosen to use whatever leverage you have right now instead of running, which means you're either very confident or very desperate, and I don't think you're desperate. A pause. You're perceptive, Reiner said. I'm a journalist, she said. Tell me what you actually want. Vale had turned in the passenger seat and was watching her with an expression that was simultaneously assessing and restraining. The expression of a man who wanted to take the phone and couldn't. The drive, Reiner said. The financial documentation and the recorded conversation. Those two items delivered to a location I specify. And Vescari walks out of this building with no further complications. And the photographs, she said. Keep them, he said. Calloway is expendable. The senator was always a liability. Cortez will manage that exposure. What he can't manage is the financial documentation and the recording. Those disappear, and the federal case becomes circumstantial. She looked at Marcus. Marcus looked back at her with the expression of a man listening very carefully to a negotiation and calculating its mathematics. She covered the phone. How many copies, she said quietly. Of the documentation, Marcus said, equally quiet. 4 separate locations. Cloud server, 2 physical drives, the legal team's secure server. She uncovered the phone. You know I'm not the only person with those files, she said to Reiner. I know, he said. But you're the person whose cooperation I'm asking for tonight. The rest of it I'll manage separately. You mean you'll run, she said. After. Once you have what you need from me. A pause. The location I'm giving you, he said. You have 10 minutes. She looked out the window. The city moved past, indifferent and enormous. The way cities were when the things happening inside them were private and desperate and had no relationship to the scale of everything else. She thought about Damien in that building. One word through static. The cost of saying it. She thought about Lily Vescari, 24 years old, and a transaction made 4 years ago by the man currently on the phone, information exchanged for personal safety. The particular calculus of someone who'd decided their own survival was worth more than someone else's life. She thought about the associate who had turned out to be Helena, 11 years of proximity, 11 years of being the person who brought coffee and said warm tea first and managed chaos on behalf of someone who trusted her completely. She thought about Trent, downstairs in a casino lobby, holding a photograph of Marcus Hale. She thought about what Reiner was actually asking. He wasn't asking for the files. He was asking her to make the same transaction Helena had made, the same transaction he had made 4 years ago, to decide that one person's survival was worth the cost to everything else. She covered the phone again. Vale, she said. The federal team. Where are they exactly? Vale was already on his other phone. He held up a hand. Wait. And then said something she couldn't hear and listened and said, 12 minutes out. They're staging 2 blocks away. Does Reiner know that? She said. Unknown. She looked at Marcus. If I give him what he wants, she started. Don't, Marcus said, quietly, firmly. The same word Damien had said through static, different meaning, same weight. She looked at him. Don't make that call, Marcus said. That's not the kind of journalist you are, and it's not the kind of person you are, and you know it. She held the phone. She thought about who she was. Not who she'd been when she ran into a strange office in the rain. Not who she'd been when she'd accepted an impossible deal from a man she didn't know. Who she was right now, in this car, with this choice. She uncovered the phone. No, she said. Silence on the line. Ms. Mercer. No, she said again. You don't get the files. You don't get the documentation. And you don't get 10 minutes because the federal team is already staged 2 blocks from you and you have less time than you think. She paused. What you have right now is an opportunity to make a different transaction. The one where you cooperate and you give them Cortez and you walk out of this with something left instead of nothing. The line was quiet. You're bluffing, Reiner said. I've spent 11 months building a case against people who were certain I was bluffing, she said. Ask the senator how that worked out. She ended the call. The car was silent. Vale was already talking into his other phone, low and rapid, and she heard the word now repeated twice, and then he was on a different call, and Marcus was looking at her with an expression she couldn't entirely read. You just, Marcus started. I know, she said. I know, she said. She looked out the window and her hands were shaking slightly. The way hands shook sometimes when the decision had been made and the body caught up to what the mind had committed to, and she pressed them flat on her thighs and breathed and looked at the buildings going past and waited. 4 minutes. Vale's phone. He listened. He turned around. "Federal team is in the building," he said. She closed her eyes for 1 second. "Damien," she said. "They're looking," Vale said. "Give it a minute." The minute was the longest one she'd had since the night she'd stood in a parking garage trying to remember how to breathe. Then Vale's phone again. He listened. And something in his face, something she'd learned to read over 31 days, shifted from the controlled flatness into something that was not quite relief, but was the thing that existed in the space where relief was about to be. "He's out," Vale said. "He's with the federal team. He's—" A pause, listening. "He's walking." She put both hands over her face. She stayed like that for maybe 5 seconds. Then she put her hands down and looked out the window and breathed. "Reiner?" she said. "In custody," Vale said. "He didn't run. When the federal team came through the door, he was—" Vale paused, listening again. He was sitting at a table, hands visible. He asked to speak with a prosecutor. She thought about what she'd said on the phone. The different transaction. The one where he gave up Cortez and walked out with something left. Reiner was a practical man. He'd made the calculation. They went back to the building. Damien was in the lobby when they arrived, sitting in a chair near the security desk with 2 federal agents standing nearby and his jacket gone and a cut along his left cheekbone that had dried dark and a particular quality to the way he was sitting, very still, very upright, the posture of a man managing something physical. He saw her come through the door. She crossed the lobby. She stopped in front of him and looked at the cut on his face and the way he was holding his left side slightly and the careful nature of his breathing. "How bad?" she said. "Manageable," he said. "That's not a medical assessment." "2 ribs," he said. "Possibly. The cut is nothing." He looked at her. "You didn't stop the car." "No," she said. He held her gaze. "He had me," Damien said, not complaining, just stating the architecture of what had happened. "He had enough leverage that you could have—" "I know what I could have done," she said. He was quiet. "You said don't," she said. I listened. Something moved in his face. Deep, tectonic. The kind of shift that didn't happen on the surface, but changed everything beneath it. She watched it happen and didn't look away. "Vivian," he said. "Don't," she said. "Not right now. Later. When all of this is later." He nodded. She sat down in the chair next to his, and they sat in the lobby while federal agents moved through the building above them, and Vale talked to people in suits, and Marcus was on the phone with the legal team, and the city went on outside the glass doors completely unchanged, because cities didn't change when the things inside them resolved. They just kept going. After a while, Damien reached over and put his hand over hers. She turned her hand over and held it. They sat like that until the federal team came back down. The story published at 11:14 the following morning. Marcus ran it under a banner headline, and the photographs were exactly as Vivian had captured them. The senator's face, Cortez's face, Reiner's 3/4 profile visible in the corner of photograph 6, the table with its transaction rendered in clear, unambiguous light. The financial documentation ran as a supplementary package. The recorded conversation was referenced but not reproduced, held in reserve for the federal proceedings. By 2 in the afternoon, Senator Calloway's office had released a statement that said nothing meaningful and confirmed everything implied. By 4, 3 additional news organizations had picked up the story and were running their own corroborating coverage. By 7, Calloway's attorney announced he was cooperating with federal investigators. Vivian read the coverage from a hotel room where Vale had moved her the previous night. Sitting cross-legged on the bed with her laptop and 3 different news feeds running simultaneously, and Marcus calling her every 40 minutes with updates she mostly already had. She read her own piece 3 times, which was something she always did after publication, looking for the places where the work had been sufficient and the places where it had fallen short, the discipline of seeing clearly rather than just feeling relieved. It was good work, not perfect. Nothing was. But it was true, and it was complete. And it said what it needed to say without saying more than it knew. And in her experience, that was the closest you got to good journalism. She called her mother in Portland. "Vivian," her mother said, and the sound of her name in that voice, The particular frequency of it, the one she'd grown up with, made her close her eyes for a second. "Hi, Mom," she said. "I saw your piece," her mother said, "on the news." "You don't read my paper." "They were talking about it on television," her mother said. "A senator, Vivian." "I know. Are you safe?" "Yes," she said. "I'm safe." A pause. "You don't cover city council meetings," her mother said. "No," she said, "I don't." Her mother was quiet for a moment. Then, "Are you eating?" "Yes, Mom." "And sleeping?" "Not much." "Come home soon," her mother said. Not a demand, just the statement of someone who had been waiting for a long time with the particular patience of people who love journalists. "Soon," Vivian said. "I promise." Trent was arrested 4 days after publication. The federal investigation that had been building around Cortez's network produced a secondary charge against him: conspiracy to interfere with a federal investigation based on his work for Reiner. The stalking and harassment charges from the original restraining order were escalated to criminal stalking given the documented pattern. His PI license was suspended pending the outcome. Vivian learned about the arrest from Vale, who texted her 2 words: "Holloway, done." She sat with her phone for a moment. She thought about 2 years of her life, the patterns he'd learned, the way she'd moved through the world differently because of him. Smaller, more careful, always aware of the door. She thought about the night she'd seen him on the corner of Michigan and Randolph in the rain, in the coat she'd bought him for his birthday, and the cold that had moved through her. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt the particular complicated thing that came when something you'd been afraid of for a long time was finally over, which wasn't joy exactly, but was adjacent to relief in a way that took time to settle. She put the phone down and went back to work. Reiner cooperated fully. His testimony took 4 days and covered, according to Sloan, who was now operating in a fully official capacity, approximately 60% of Cortez's U.S. financial network and 3 years of documented criminal coordination with elected officials across 6 states. He named names, he produced records, he gave dates and locations and the specific operational details that turned a case from strong to overwhelming. In exchange, he received a reduced charge and a federal protection arrangement that would relocate him after sentencing. Damien didn't attend any of the proceedings. Vivian asked him once if he wanted to know what Reiner had said in his testimony. They were sitting in a different house by then, something Vale had arranged, smaller than the lake house, a 3rd-floor apartment in a neighborhood she didn't know well. And Damien was reading something at the kitchen table, and she was working at the counter, the easy geography of 2 people who had learned each other's rhythms in close proximity. He looked up from his reading. "No," he said. She nodded. "Do you know if he talked about Lily?" she said. A pause. "Sloan told me he mentioned her in the context of establishing Reiner's relationship with Cortez," he said. "Factual. Dates. He didn't—" He stopped. "It was factual." "Okay," she said. He looked down at his reading. "Damien," she said. He looked up. "I found the photograph," she said, "in the basement, a month ago. Of you and Lily." She paused. "I should have told you I'd seen it." He was very still. "You looked happy," she said. "Both of you." He said nothing for a moment. Then, "We were." He said it the way he'd said her name that night in the lobby. With weight. With the particular weight of something true that cost something to say. She had this quality. She made everything feel like it was going to be all right, even when it wasn't. I always thought that was naive, and she always told me I was wrong. A pause. She was right. I was wrong. I just didn't understand what she meant until she wasn't there anymore. Vivian set down what she was holding. She crossed the kitchen and sat down across from him at the table. He looked at her. "Helena," she said. "Being processed through federal charges," he said. "Conspiracy, obstruction, accessory after the fact in multiple counts." He paused. 11 years. "Are you?" "No," he said. "I'm not all right about it. I don't think I will be for a long time." He looked at his hands on the table. "She was the person who, when Lily died, she was the person who kept the house running when I couldn't. I thought she was—" He stopped. "I don't know who she actually was. I don't know how much of 11 years was real." Vivian looked at him. Some of it, she said. He looked up. People aren't one thing, she said. She might have been working against you and also, in whatever complicated way people manage contradictions, also genuinely have been the person who kept the house running when you couldn't. Both of those things can be true at once. He held her gaze. That's a generous position, he said. It's an accurate one, she said. I've been in this business long enough to know that people who do terrible things are almost never only terrible. It doesn't excuse anything. It's what's real. He was quiet for a long moment. You're very honest, he said. I'm a journalist, she said. It's a professional deformation. He almost smiled. The full version of it this time, not just the edge, a real smile, brief and unguarded, and she saw in it the quality she'd seen in the basement photograph, the door that had been closed for 3 years opening by a fraction. What happens to you now? She said. The legal situation. My attorney has been managing it, he said. The financial documentation I turned over and my cooperation in the federal case creates a complex picture. I'm not immune from scrutiny, but I'm not currently facing charges and my attorney believes the cooperation credit will hold. He paused. I'm also in the process of restructuring. Legitimately. It takes time and it's not simple, but you're doing it, she said. Yes, he said. Because of Cortez, she said. Because of what happened to Lily. Not because of Lily, he said. And he stopped. He looked at her directly. Because some things become untenable. You look at what the world you're operating in actually costs, and you make a calculation. He paused. The calculation changed. She looked at him. When? She said. He held her gaze. Sometime around the 3rd week, he said, approximately. She breathed. Outside the apartment window, the city was going about its business in the particular way of cities in early winter, gray and purposeful, people moving fast against the cold, the light going early. She'd always loved this time of year in cities. The quality of the light, the way everything seemed more vivid against the gray. I accepted a position, she said. Marcus told me about it 2 days ago. A paper in Washington. Investigative desk. She paused. It's the position I've wanted for a long time. Damien was very still. Washington, he said. Yes. He said nothing. I haven't accepted yet, she said. I told Marcus I needed a few days. He looked at her. You should accept it, he said. It's what you've worked for. I know, she said. Vivian, I know, she said again. I'm going to accept it. She held his gaze. I just wanted you to know before I did. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached across the table, the same gesture as the lobby. Hand over hers, the warmth of it, the particular weight of a person who didn't touch lightly reaching for you anyway. The city you're going to, he said, is 400 miles from the city I'm restructuring in. I'm aware of geography, she said. I have business in Washington, he said. Legitimate business. Increasing amounts of it given the restructuring. She looked at him. That's a very Damien Viscari way to say something, she said. I'm aware, he said. She turned her hand over under his. Okay, she said. He looked at their hands on the table. Okay, he said. She accepted the position the following morning. The months that followed were not simple. Nothing that had been broken in the process of all of this was simple to rebuild. Damien's restructuring was slow and legally complicated, and there were weeks where the scrutiny was intense enough that they spoke more carefully than either of them would have chosen to. Her position in Washington was demanding in the way that positions you've worked your whole life for were demanding. The learning curve, the new colleagues, the new city, the particular loneliness of starting over in a place where nobody knew your history. They figured it out in the way that people who understood negotiation figured things out. Not smoothly, not without friction, but with the specific commitment of two people who had already been through enough together that the ordinary difficulties of distance and schedule and the residue of separate difficult pasts were navigable. Reiner was sentenced 8 months after his testimony. 54 months, federal minimum security, identity restructuring to follow. Damien read the sentence in a news brief and put his phone face down on his desk and sat for a while. He didn't call Vivian about it. She called him. I saw, she said. Yes, he said. Are you? I will be, he said. She stayed on the line. Tell me something else, he said. Tell me about whatever you're working on. So she told him. She was building a piece on regulatory capture in the pharmaceutical sector. Months of groundwork, the particular slow architecture of a story that needed time to be right. She talked about it the way she talked about work when she was deep in it, with the specific energy of someone who loved what they did, even the parts that were difficult, even the parts that made her eat lunch at her desk and lose track of evenings. He listened. She could hear him listening, the quality of it. You love it, he said when she paused. The work? Yes, she said. Always. I know, he said. I knew that about you the first night. A pause. The way you held the camera, like it was the most important thing in the room. She was quiet. It was, she said. At that point. At that point, he said. At that point, she said again. Esteban Cortez was arrested 14 months after publication at a private residence in Zurich on a provisional warrant issued by the federal court and coordinated through 3 international agreements. The arrest made the front page of every major paper. Vivian's original photographs ran alongside the coverage. Photographer credit, V. Mercer. And Marcus called her at 6 in the morning because he knew she'd be awake. You did this, he said. We did this, she said. You started it, he said. She looked out the window of her Washington apartment at the gray early morning, the city just beginning. I stumbled into the right office, she said. That's not what happened, Marcus said. She smiled. That's a little bit what happened, she said. She told Damien about the Cortez arrest in person because he was in Washington that week for the first of several legal meetings related to the restructuring. And they were in the kitchen of her apartment with coffee and the particular comfortable disorder of his travel bag still in the hallway, and the morning light coming through the east-facing window at the angle she'd come to love most in this apartment. He was quiet when she told him, not the weighted quiet of someone managing something, just quiet. The settled kind. It's over, he said. Yes, she said. He picked up his coffee and looked out the window. She watched his face. Not all of it was over, she knew. The legal proceedings would continue for years. The restructuring would take time. The things that had been done to Lily wouldn't be undone by a warrant served in Zurich. The things Damien had been, and the things she'd been through, and the ways both of them had been changed by all of it. Those weren't things that resolved cleanly because the external situation had. But she also knew that the weight she'd seen him carrying since the first night, the specific weight of a man who'd been holding a door shut for 3 years against something he was afraid to look at directly, had shifted. Not gone, but different. The way weight became different when you stopped carrying it alone. He turned from the window. He looked at her with the expression that was no longer unreadable to her. She'd learned it, all the layers of it. Thank you, he said. For what? She said. For not stopping the car, he said. She held his gaze. You would have done the same, she said. I know, he said. But you didn't know that for certain, not then. She thought about it. No, she said. I didn't. She crossed the kitchen. She put her hand on the side of his face, careful, near but not on the cut that had healed to a thin scar along his cheekbone. And she felt him lean into it slightly, the involuntary quality of it, like something that didn't know how to be anything else. I trusted the calculation, she said. That's what I had. He put his hand over hers. The calculation, he said. The calculation, she said. And outside the window, the city kept going, indifferent and enormous, people moving fast against the cold, the light hitting the buildings at the angle of early winter that she'd always loved. And inside the kitchen, 2 people who had survived each other and themselves and the long, difficult machinery of getting to this moment stood in the ordinary warmth of a Tuesday morning and held on. Not because everything was fixed, not because the past had been erased or the debt settled, or the scars smoothed over into something that looked like they'd never been there, but because they had both, separately and together, chosen to be in this room on this morning, and that choice, made again every day, as all real choices were, was the only foundation that had ever held anything worth building. The story had been published. The shadows had names now. And the rest, the slow, imperfect, necessary rest, belonged to them.